basically how I got into punk rock was I was living in San Francisco in '79, and I was into the Grateful Dead. I was like total deadhead. I was 17 years old, and I was living in San Francisco, and a friend of mine from Philadelphia came to me and he goes, you need to check this shit out. And I'm like, what? Check what out? And the first punk rock show I ever saw was the summer of 1980 at the Fab Mab, Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco. It was Dead Kennedys, DOA, and the Dicks. That was the summer of 1980, and that was it. That was
and then you came to Philadelphia when?
Well, I stayed out there.
Okay.
I stayed out there until 82.
Okay.
So from 1980 until 82, I lived in San Francisco. So I saw everything. Like every fucking day. I saw, Black Flag before Henry was in the band. I saw Dez.
Okay.
I saw everything. Everything that there was to see, I saw at every, great fucking venue on Broadway. Yeah, what I came back to was nothing. Because I didn't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I knew New York, but I hadn't lived in New York. I never saw punk rock on the East Coast.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I didn't know. I knew about the Bad Brains, you know what I mean? But I didn't know about anything. I knew about Minor Threat and the Bad Brains and the DC thing, but I didn't know anything about Midwest stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I was just a West Coast guy. You know what I mean? I was totally plugged into the West Coast punk rock thing. Okay. All the West Coast bands,
Okay.
And a lot of the Midwest bands, too, like Husker Du and, like, The Fix. A lot of the Detroit stuff I knew about, but I didn't see any of those bands from reading, like, Flipside or Maximum Rock and Roll or something like that. But when I came back here in '82, I went to 3rd Street Jazz, which was this killer record store on 3rd Market. And 3rd Market back then was still a lot really dicey. It wasn't like, it wasn't built up or anything. It was like Old City. It was shitty. It wasn't great. And there was a great record store there, and they had everything in there, you know what I mean? They had all the fucking new stuff, all the punk rock stuff, all just like jazz and punk rock. Downstairs was punk rock, upstairs was all jazz. So it was really cool, and the vibe there was great because they just kept buying all the new 7-inches. So that's kind of where, for me, that's kind of where I met everybody. I met Ethan from McRad there. I met Steve I there. I met, Jeff Ginsberg there. I met a lot of people that knew something about the scene here. Mm-hmm. So, you start talking, and then eventually you find out where people are doing indie shows. Then there was like, by the time I got here, the BYO was already happening. And that was like people from Sadistic Exploits, Robbie and Allison and Brian. Those guys were doing BYO shows. And I went to them, but it wasn't really my thing. Mm-hmm. They were more into that, like, Studs and British trip. They all had mohawks, and like I had nothing to do with that. I wasn't British, and I didn't like any of that shit. I was fucking American. I was down with Black Flag and the fucking Bad Brains, man. Fuck all that other shit. I didn't want to know about it. Fuck it, I didn't care about the Exploited or Discharge or any of those bands. I mean, now it's different. I appreciate for what they did, but I'm not. I was an American kid. Man, there was only like 2 bands. Mm-hmm. There was 2 bands. There was Autistic Behavior and the Sadistic Exploits. So you either I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. You either
I got Mike from Autistic, or Craig. I talked to him.
Craig's my boy.
Yeah. I got his number. I didn't talk to him.
Fuck. Have you talked to him?
No, I just got his number off of Jim Winters.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So there was basically you were either in the Autistic Behavior camp, which was like the skateboarder, fucking pot smoking, totally having fun, or you were into the Sadistic Exploits trip, which was like leather jackets and studs and kind of like oi oi oi, which like I said really didn't. Nice people. I've seen a lot of shit, and there are still like I hate using the term like, oh, they were way ahead of their time. Like, they were fucking on it, man. Because they weren't a punk rock band, but they weren't a rock and roll band. So they kind of like had this, they were just good musicians. fucking dude Wayne was a killer guitar player. Craig was like a monster bass player. The drummer, I forget his name, was a great drummer. Yes, I forget the drummer's name, and the singer was John Smith. And John was like this little tiny dude, you know, like super like small man complex, but really good front man because he was like super, like, he was like an antagonizer, you know, he just like, you know, he's a cocky little fucker, you know, and they were really good. And like a lot of the touring bands that came through always had ABs open for them because they were like the best band in the city. Mm-hmm. You know, this is before Wide Eye, this is before Ruin, this is like 81, so 82, 83 is what, like 81, 82 is when Autistic Behavior were killing it. You know, they were fucking amazing. And from that band spawned a lot of other Philly punk rock bands because people would go see Autistic Behavior, and then obviously, you know, the garage, you know, effect happened where everybody started playing, you know. So bands like Wide Eye and bands like Seeds of Terror and, you know, Flag of Democracy and like McRad, especially McRad and FOD. Both those two bands were heavily influenced by Autistic Behavior, you know, definitely. And, you know, so like, I mean, by the time I got here in 82, there was definitely a scene going on, but it hadn't unified yet because it was still like a lot of kids, there was only a few of us. You know, there may have been 50 kids, if that, maybe. You know, maybe 50 kids. So we would just like, you know, do the same thing, you know, like poster, man. You would go into like 3rd Street or like, you know, Sound of Market Street. It was only like 2 or 3 record stores. And fucking hopefully you saw a poster there. And when you saw it, you were like, yes, you know. And, you know, so by 82, they were doing shows at Love Club. And, you know, I saw a few shows there. I saw the Misfits there, and like I saw Gun Club there. There was some stuff going on, but the trick was by the end of 82, there wasn't really much going on in the sense we needed a venue, you know, in Philly. Because there was the East Side Club, which was like the corporate club, which had tons of great shows at, tons and tons of good stuff went on there. But it was the corporate club. And when you're 18 years old and you can't get into an over 21 club, but you do anyway, you still want to fucking just do DIY stuff because it's way more fun. You know, the bands are killer, you know, you're hanging out, smoking weed, doing your thing, you know, having fun, as you should. So, this guy I knew, I went to school with, his cousin owned the building where the Love Club was at Broad and South. Okay. And I was doing a transaction with him or something, and I said, you know, man, I said, you should let us book shows in here. I said, I'll fucking have this place packed. Because it was like it was a whore club. You know, it was like selling coke and pills, and there was whores downstairs, and the guys who were working it at the time were like really, really sporadical. You know what I mean? Like, it was like super, you know, not sporadical, but sporadic. You know what I mean? It was like they would do shows once in a while, and it was like more of an art crowd. You know what I mean? It was just like that kind of crowd. It was like an artsy crowd, like the Stickmen would play there. A lot of bands, like a lot of bands that weren't punk rock bands, but kind of like, you know, back then it wasn't so black and white. You know, a lot of bands played together, like, you know, Mother May I. They were like an art fag band. You know what I mean? Like, you know, everybody knew that. You know, they weren't a punk rock band, but like back then there was so few shows that sometimes there was like that cross pollination. You know, where other different bands would play with each other. You know, and you know, you kind of have to tolerate watching like some like dude in like a black and white suit with a skinny tie, fucking jumping around, and then you know the next band's like ripping your face off. You know, so you know you had to kind of deal with that. But so anyway, getting back to the Love Club, so I said, look, I'll book this place and we'll fucking have this place bonkers. So at that point, I had become friends with Bruce Momich and Steve I. Steve I is the guy who videotaped all of that early punk rock shit. The American Hardcore movie.
Most you wasn't from what
bro. Like we gave him all that shit, all that stuff that he was videoing from a balcony. Yeah, that's Love Club, man. Okay, that's all Love Club, all that stuff. Negative Approach and You know, I mean, I can go on and on and on, everybody. So what happened was I was friends with Steve I and Bruce, and they had been booking shows at the Elk Center, which was at 16th and Fitzwater. They did a bunch of shows there. They did the Brains there, and then they did this Philly punk rock, Philly bands. It was like, I forget what it was called, man. The name eludes me, but it was all Philly hardcore bands. You know, ABs played, and like Seats of Terror, and like the protest scene there. So anyway, I go to Dude, I said, let's book this place. The first show we did was like May, and it was, we were supposed to do a show that February, but there was a huge snowstorm, so we had to cancel. So we pushed it back to May, and the first show was MDC, The Dicks, DRI, Crucifix, and this band called New Jersey's Finest, which was a local band out of New Jersey, and there was like 500 people there. They fucking, everybody made a ton of money. The bands made a ton of money. The club sold out of all their liquor, and it was fucking amazing, So needless to say, it was on after that, and we just started doing shows every single week. What happened was there was a fire, July 3rd, 1983. This crazy motherfucker from Broad and South was a whole different world back then. Philly was a different world back then. We're talking about it's so fucking pasteurized right now, man. The way when you walk down the street back in 1982 or 83, and you had a bald head and like an army jacket, you were fucked. You were fucked. It was a different thing. So, Broad Street in general, that whole area was really fucking dicey, man. It was like white kids didn't go down there. It was like homies, man. The ghettos were like, the high rises were at like 13th and Fitzwater. That whole area was like really, really not, like dicey. So this dude, homeless guy, crazy dude, walks into the bar. We were in D.C. for the Rock Against Reagan show. So it was the Kennedys, Crucifix, MDC, all these bands were playing in D.C. The next day, we had a show in Philly with Jodie Foster's Army. And we got word that this crazy dude walked up to the bar, got a bunch of drinks, picked up a hooker, went upstairs, and lit the place on fire. So the fucking place burnt down. The bar, the whole entire upstairs was gutted. But the place where the club was, where the bands played, didn't sustain any damage, only smoke and water damage. So it was still standing, but the whole fucking place was fucked, So we were like, wow, what do we do now? After like 5 months of like doing really good shows. And then we realized that across the street had been for rent, which was called the Long March Music Hall, which was this big ass venue, which was the old South Philly National Bank. So I got in touch with the guy who was, renting the place out, and we rented it, and we did a bunch of shows in there. They were really good shows. Void, Antidote, Iron Cross, like Negative Approach, like really good. And they were fucking punk rock fests, man. People came from all over Boston, D.C. Everybody played there. You know what I mean? I never went to Dobbs, ever. Ever. For what? It was a bunch of like piano dudes, Waco Smith and all the, you know what I mean, dude? I never would go there, ever. It was like new wave, bullshit. Skinny ties, man, skinny ties. I came back, and it was the summer, it was July 81, and it was like Henry hadn't joined Black Flag yet. And it was like his audition, pretty much. They played 2 nights. They played Philly, and then the next night they played Irving Plaza. I didn't go to the show at Irving Plaza, but basically what happened was, like, nobody, you're not from Philly. It's very difficult to understand Kensington. I'm from Philly. I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Oxford Circle. So I took the L every day into town. You know what I mean? Like, that was how I got to and from Bridge and Pratt downtown. You know what I mean? So where does that go? Straight through Kensington, bro. You know what I mean? There ain't no way of getting around it. So I knew what the dynamic was in Kensington. And when I heard there was going to be a show at the Starlight, I was just like, that's insane. You know what I mean? But they had that dude, David Carroll. See, he promoted a lot of punk rock before, like, he was older than us. So he had been promoting, like, he ran that place, the Hot Club, man, at 21st and South. It's like that 10 Stone bar now. But everybody played there, you know what I mean? Like, Iggy played there. Like, I mean, somebody, like, I just was like, you got it. It was like, when you're 18, you got to go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a fuck where it's at. There's no way I'm. Plus, you know, like, you know something's going to happen. But you really want to go see the band. So when I got there, there was, the next year the Kennedys played there. Did you know this?
No.
The following summer the Kennedys played there. But I'll get back to that.
Yeah, stay in order.
So all I remember, okay, of that was, it was the DC Skinheads versus the Philly punk rock Mohicans versus the Kenzos. So it was insane, because I remember the DC. See, we were okay. You know what I mean? I was okay because I didn't have a mohawk.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I had a bald head. You know what I mean? So I was like more like, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't out there. You know, it was more like every man for himself. You know, but I can remember clearly, you know, going out, and it was like post-apocalyptic. It was like, I remember the DC Skins running down the street with fucking chains, swinging, hitting dudes with mohawks, and then the Kensington dudes and the DC dudes fighting. You know, because you knew the it was mega.
They were defending the turf.
Fuck yeah, dude. You're not going to bring your stupid bullshit into my neighborhood. You know what I mean? It was when Kensington was still Kensington, you know. It wasn't a bunch of white fucking hipsters with, like, you know, brew pubs moving in on every corner down there. You know, it wasn't like that. You know, it was a very, you know, white working class, you know, yeah. But that's what I remember most about it. But what I do remember about the show was, I remember Henry getting up there and singing, like, what the fuck did they do? Stepping Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They did that. Or not Stepping Stone. What the fuck cover did they do? Louie. Yeah, that was it. How could I forget?
Okay.
So, you know, that night, like, you know, Henry got up there and did Louie, and then he did it the next night in New York. And then after that, they asked him to audition, and then it was a no-brainer because Des wanted to play guitar anyway. But that's what I mean, the Kensington thing was like, you know, if you want me to give you, like, you know, you're talking like 30 years ago. But I can remember, you know, I could still remember, like, clearly how it was, but it was mayhem, you know. The show was awesome. But I just remember it. That's the thing, like, I remember being inside, and you were safe, but you knew what was going to happen once the show let out. And the DC dudes owned that place. Like, you wouldn't even dare get on the floor and try to dance. They would have fucking killed you. They were thick, dude. The Georgetown, like, punks, man, like, were no joke. You know what I mean? They were serious business. You know, they came in, you know, they handled themselves well. But the Philly fuckers got pounded. That's why Philly was always like, that's why we always tried to separate ourselves from, like, the rest of the city, because it was just, you know, a lot of posers, man. You know, I guess that's what you call them, you know. A lot of dudes who were into fashion and weren't into, like, you know, Wide-Eye, there was like only a couple of bands, you know, Wide-Eye being the only one I could really, like, say that really, like, were able to, like, back it up. Mm-hmm. You know, and not so much with, like, force, if they had to, you know. I mean, between the fucking, you know, between Howard, Neil, and Mike, you know, they were no joke. You know, they'll fuck you up. And they weren't afraid either. 84, 85, I was done. I was into other stuff. I was just into rediscovering old stuff, you know, like old Detroit stuff. And, yeah, and Ruin wasn't like a hardcore band. They just kind of cross-pollinated. It's like one of those things that, like, played punk rock shows, but they weren't like, you know, when I say, look, I don't know what you consider punk rock, you know, because people, you know, use that term, punk rock, but I don't know what you think punk rock is. What I think punk rock is, for real, is like Bad Brains, Black Flag, Minor Threat, you know, Antidote, you know, like Necros, Negative Approach, you know, any of the Detroit stuff, Poison Idea, to me, that's punk rock music. You know, all that other, I don't know what the fuck else. I mean, and that's like a generalization. You know, but like Husker Du, were they a punk rock band? Yeah, sure, but what they morph into? They morphed into a college radio friendly kind of like, you know, what they really were. They were more like kind of like a buzz band, you know what I mean? They were like a college rock band who got kind of like, you know, forced into this punk rock genre because it was kind of like, that's where you fit in, you know? I'll tell you, man, like the first time I heard them, I was just like, this is this shit. It was like a buzzsaw. They were bad motherfuckers, man. They, you know, it's just one of those things when you're involved with a band. And I was involved with them because they were my homies, man, you know, and I never tried to, like, I wasn't like some big, like, I'm going to be like a promoter and I'm going to, like, be a manager. And, like, you know, if I knew what I knew now, then I would have fucking totally pursued that, you know, because that's kind of like what I did, you know. But, like, there was no bands like them. The only band that I think that even came close, the only two bands that I think came close to Wide Eye was Negative Approach and Poison Idea. And that you could put in there. Like, they were the only two fucking bands, like, that even came close to, like, matching what Wide Eye was doing. Yeah, they're no joke, you know what I mean? Like, they were, like, you know, here, but they never got it, you know what I mean? I mean, Iron Cross to some degree, but, like, not as tough, you know, like, the songs Wide Eye were doing were so fucking good, man, you know, like, so good. I don't think they viewed Philadelphia as a scene because it wasn't viable because a lot of bands didn't get out of Philly. Wide Eye only played CBs like once or twice. They played Great Gildersleeves. I was at that show.
So you'd call them more or less Philly legends.
Who? Wide Eye?
Yeah.
Well, they got out more than others, and they didn't even get out. They only played DC once, Wide Eye.
Wow.
They played New York maybe a handful
so
of times.
they were in a way regionally famous.
Oh
you
yeah,
would say.
but the word got out because, like, you know, when you send demo cassettes to people, they get the shit, and like dudes from Croydon and Milwaukee were getting, you know, like once, you know what I mean? Once people got the demo, like we got Poison Idea's first demo, and we were like, fuck. You know what I mean? We got Negative FX's demo. We were like, fuck. You know? I mean, they're another band like Negative FX. They're definitely in that echelon, you know?
Yeah, former Slap. Yeah, Slap, yeah. But,
they were definitely, like, there was only a couple bands, though, you know? Like, I mean, and like, you know, in my eyes, you know, I love the West Coast stuff, but, like, you know, the only two bands that, like, you know, that really fucking laid it down were Black Flag and the Bad Brains. You know, they were the only two. I mean, and when I say laid it down, it was like, put your fucking gear on when you're going, because it's going to be on.
That footage on American Hardcore where Rollins is punching that dude, that was Philly,
outside,
right?
Yeah,
that was from Philly.
Steve shot that.
No, wasn't that true? Like, with Philly, like, were they just challenging him on that because they're Black Flag?
Fucking with them.
Yeah.
That's what we're like.
Was that a Philly thing, or was that everywhere they went?
No, I think it was probably everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you know you want to fuck with, you know, fuck with Henry, you know, fuck with the dudes. Yeah.
It wasn't like Philly didn't like Black Flag in any way, right?
No. But who knows? Yeah. That dude might have had a beef with Henry from like a couple of years before that. Who knows? You know. I don't know, underrated, but I'll give you a basic idea of how fucking shitty Philly is. Right? The Dead Milkmen are like punk rock, like heroes from this town. Those dudes suck. They sucked then, and they still suck. You know, that those dudes asked me for a gig, like, you know, and I was like, you know what I said to the dude? The guy who's dead now, the bass player, you know, like, God rest his soul and all, you know, he was a super nice guy. But, like, I saw him on the L, and he's like, hey, man, you know, like, do you think, you know, you might be able to give us a gig? This is, like, summer of '83. And I was like, you know what my response was? I was like, I don't know if you guys are punk rock enough, you know? And then, you know, who knew? You know, they would go on the tour with the Dickies and all this. And I was just like, God, are you serious? This is, like, so fucking lame. It's like bad college, you know, indie fucking crap. I hated that shit. Hated frat parties, dude.
Yeah.
Hated. That's all they were about, man. All they did was play at that fucking Sigma Phi Lam Blam Jam shit out. They were like a West Philly band, you know what I mean? I don't fucking.
Gotcha.
You know.
Anything?
You know that movie? You know that band Dead Spot? Dead Spot. They were a good Philly band. They were a good Philly band. Like I don't think a lot of people like. They were good. But back at like even early on, man, there wasn't like so many like good Philly bands. You know, like there wasn't, and I'm not just being biased.
No, it's fine.
Jaded, you know, there just wasn't that many great Philly bands. You know, I mean, Autistic Behavior. I would give Autistic Behavior the nod as the band that was the most influential Philly punk rock band, like hands down. You know, and then Wide-Eye was like second generation, because you know ABs were around, you know, way before Wide-Eye. Wide-Eye, they were all going to AB shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when ABs were playing. But I really think the ABs were like, and Sadistic Exploits.
So would you say them? Would you call them the actual grandfather?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
I mean, well, as far as American hardcore goes, fucking without a doubt. But this is what I can say, you know,
Okay.
and that there is no fucking doubt in my mind that punk rock changed my life. Like, I mean, without a doubt, there's no way I would be who I am without punk rock. It's just, you know, I cut my teeth on it, and it allowed me to open my mind to like more creative things. You know, and I think that did that with a lot of people. You know, I think a lot of people, you know, after getting exposed to, you know, punk rock, they either, you know, died or, you know, got into other things, you know, that were more creative and, you know, but that first wave, that first, like, jolt, there was nothing ever like it, you know, nothing. It was amazing. It was really amazing, you know, from, like, and I was really fortunate to have been a part of that, you know, from, like, late 79 to, like, 84, you know, that was my thing, you know. It was good, though. You know, I kind of, like, I kind of have a love-hate relationship about the city of Philadelphia for the simple fact that, like, there was never a real big core of people that supported the shows or supported, like, you know, because the city was very, like, scattered. But the good thing about living in Philadelphia is that it was so close to D.C. and Baltimore and New York and Boston that it allowed us to be able to, like, you know, go to D.C. to see a bunch of shows at the Wilson Center or go to Baltimore to Jules's Loft. Baltimore was a great town too, man. There was so much good shit coming from Baltimore. There was more good bands coming out of Baltimore than there was in Philly. It's true. There was way more good bands coming out of Baltimore. At least I thought so, you know. But, you know, I guess, you know, a lot of those bands, like, that was weird. Back in, like, the early 80s, there was no scenes. I mean, there may have been, but, like, most of the kids that lived in Lehigh Valley or in Scranton or you know, near Harrisburg, they would have to come to Philadelphia because there was no fucking shows going on out there in 81 and 82. Maybe some, you know what I mean, but, like, few and far between. Like, we never left the city. You know, what for? Mm-hmm. You know, so, you know what I mean? That like Lehigh Valley stuff came, like, way after I was in it. You know, where am I going to go? New York or fucking, like, Ephrata? Reading. There was a good skate park in Reading back in the day.